Hello all. In this video, we're going to take a look at string methods. We'll use this as an opportunity to reintroduce you to the idea of a method, what that is at all. And then we'll look at the many extremely useful string methods that Python provides to us. One of Python's strengths actually is manipulating strings in really useful and interesting ways. So there are so many of these tools. I do not in any way expect that you're going to memorize them all. What you want to do is to maybe memorize a few that you use a lot. And other than that, make sure you know how to look them up when you need them. All right, let's take a look at my notes. So I have a little section here about string methods. It's kind of short because there are so many of them. I didn't want to include them all in my notes. What I will do first is to remind you of what a method is. So we have talked about functions that operate on data types like the len, the length function that lets us calculate the length of a list or a string. There are also methods, and they look a little different. So I'm going to go over to Python actually. We'll take a look at the difference between methods and functions. So if I have in this case I have a list. Let me make a string. S equals, hello there. That's just a good string. If I have a function that's going to operate on S, I call it by putting the name of the function, and then a paren, and then I pass it S. So len of S, and it returns the number of characters in that string. So generally when you call a function, you put its name and then you pass it the data you want to have it operate on. But when in a lot of programming languages, we have these things called methods. And it comes from a slightly different way of thinking about programming. Fundamentally, what we're doing with a method is we're imagining the data is more complicated than just some numbers or some characters that have been collected together. There's this whole philosophy around classes and objects and object-oriented programming, which actually is a part of Python. In this course, we're not going to do much with it because you don't have to do object-oriented programming in Python, but we do work with objects because they are built in. So I'm going to focus on the idea of an object. The class is just the type. So a string is a class, and strings themselves that we build in our programs, those are objects. What is an object? An object is it basically collects together some set of data and a set of operations on that data that are defined by the type. So all string objects will have the same methods. That's what we call these operations that operate on the data. All strings have the same set of methods. Every string has methods, and we can access them to do things to the string. When you think about it, you think about it as if we're almost like asking the string to do something instead of doing something to it, which is kind of what you feel like you're doing when you call a function and pass it some data. So in practice, what does that look like? Well, a function gets passed the data that it's operating on. But if I have a string method, what's a good one I can introduce easily? I'll introduce upper. I use a different notation. Instead of passing S to upper, I write it as S dot upper, and then I have open and close parens. Now, there are methods that also take in inputs. And we'll see some of those later on. But they don't take in the string that they operate on. Why? Because they belong to the string. A method is a function that belongs to the string object or to an object. In this case, it's a string method that belongs to a string object. You notice this looks a lot like the notation that we use when we call functions that are defined in modules. And that's because that's how modules get implemented, is they're actually module objects, and we're calling the module to use the things that are inside of it. So in this case, S is our string. We put a dot, and then we put the name of the method we want S to apply to its data. It's just a weird notation in a way, but it's really highly useful as a way of organizing your thinking about programming. S.upper, what is this going to do? It's going to return to me a new string, because remember, strings are immutable, so I can't change the contents of the string that is S. But I can make a new string, and it's going to convert all of the alphabetic characters to uppercase. So instead of hello there, I get hello there. There are other things that you can do, so I'll give you another example. S2 is ABC 1, 2, 3. I want to include some punctuation here and spaces. So notice that the only things that change are the alphabetic characters. The alphabetic characters get converted to uppercase. That's what upper does. So, and again, we said S2.upper because that's the variable that holds the string, and this is the method that belongs to the string type. I can do really, really weird things like this. We almost never use this notation. Please don't write code with this kind of notation, but you can do it because ABC in quotes is a string. Therefore, it has methods. Therefore, I can say dot and put a method and call it. Much like function calls, you have to have the parentheses on here or it's not going to call the method. It's just going to refer to the method, which is different. We don't want to do that right now. All right, so that's to give you a sense of the difference between methods and functions. Let's go back and talk a little bit more about what all kinds of things we can do with string methods. So I don't have the methods listed here. I'm going to show you the documentation on string methods. Python documentation is a little cryptic at first, but once you get the hang of how it describes things, it's actually really useful, and I'd strongly recommend that you learn to look at it. There are general categories of string methods that I'm describing here. You can change capitalization. I've shown you that. You've got upper, there's lower, there's several others that we'll look at later. You can change the spacing of the string, so you can pad it out to be a longer string. You can center or left justify or right justify the text within that longer string. You can check the string contents for certain types of characters. So you can say, is this string made up of only alphabetic or only numerical characters? Does it have any white space in it? Like space, tab, or new line is what we call white space. You can also search and replace the contents of strings, but the trick is it's never changing the original string. It's always building a new string where we have done the replacement. And you can do things like breaking strings into pieces, which turns out to be intensely useful, and maybe we'll see some examples of that later on. All right, I want to look at the Python documentation for string methods, which I have here. And I have a link in my other document to this. So there's a lot of information about strings here. And then there's a subsection about string methods. There are many more methods than we are going to talk about. This is the place to go and find out about them. So there's a capitalize method, which returns a copy of the string with the first character capitalized and the rest lowercase. I'll show you an example of that in a moment. Case fold, it's basically like lower casing, but it does some extra special things. Centering, counting, so you can count how often a certain substring occurs within the original string. Encoding and decoding in different forms. Ends with is so handy. We're going to use this in not too long. Ends with lets you know if the end of the string fits a certain pattern. There's also a starts with, I believe, later on. Find lets you look for the position of a substring in an overall string. Format lets you do some fancy formatting, which we aren't really going to look at very much. Is alpha tells you if all the characters in a string are alphabetic. Is alnum alphabetical or number tells you if they're all either numbers or alphabetical. Is digit, is decimal, all of these sorts of things. Check various features of strings. This just goes on and on. There's a really long list. A more reasonable list is going to be in our activity. So what I've done is to organize them by type, and I don't include all of them. But still, capitalization related, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 different methods just for messing with the capitalization on strings. So all of these return a new string, or the first few, they are just checking. Is the string already lowercase? Is the string already uppercase? Does it already have the title case? So these are ways to check whether you need to change the capitalization of the string, and then the other 5 change the capitalization in various ways. Let's go and do a couple more examples of this, because the capitalization is kind of fun to play with. I'm actually going to go back to over here because I just want to do these in a different way, show you what it looks like. So I'm going to do new1 equals s1 dot swap case, because that's a fun one. New2 equals s2 dot lower. New3 equals s3 dot title. And we'll try capitalize as well. And then we're just going to print these out. Print new1. New1 and new2 are short, so I'll print them together, and then new3 and new4 I'm going to print by themselves because they're long, and it's good to be able to compare about one above the other. All right, so what do we see when we look? What I did with the first one was I did swap case. So you can see that it made the S lowercase, and then it capitalized everything else. The second one just made the word fox lowercase. This is title case. Every word is capitalized, so it looks for spaces followed by alphabetic characters, and it makes them capital. And capitalize did some interesting things. It capitalizes the starting, but then it lowercases everything else. So it turned the capital I into a lowercase I. There are lots of things that you can do with these, and you'll get into that in the activities. So let's go back and look at some more methods. We're just going to take a look at a few of them, and then I'll show you some that are really particularly interesting and useful. This set of string methods adjust the spacing of the string. So center, ljust, and rjust, they let you make a string bigger, and you can fill in with blanks or with other things. And I'll show you a couple of examples of that in a minute. One of the most useful string methods that we have is this one right here, strip. Strip removes the characters you tell it to remove from the beginning or end of a string. So it's a really great way to get rid of extraneous spaces at the beginning of a string or the end of the string, or possibly punctuation marks or other things like that that are at the beginning or end of the string. So it can be really helpful for cleaning strings when you need to work with a more simple version of them. Let me just show you a couple of examples of centering and left and right, left ljust and rjust, because those are kind of fun. So I'm going to just deal with string 1, which was Susan, and let's do, I'm just going to reuse the variables I had before. New 1 is going to be s1.center 30. New 2 is going to be s1.center 30 dash. New 3 equals s1.ljust And then we'll print these. All on one line, because why not? Got a little too long. I should have printed them. Maybe I should print them each on their own line, just so I can see them above one another. All right, so you can see here, this is just our ordinary centering. This is really nice if you want to put things in columns. Here I filled in with dashes, and I did the L-just with dashes, and I did the R-just where I filled in with S's, just for fun. So it lets you reformat strings in some really useful ways. All right, there are a set of methods that let us check the contents of a string. I pointed these out before. The only four we really are going to care much about are these ones. Is alpha lets you know if a string is all alphabetic. Is alnum if it's all alphabetic or numeric. Is digit lets you know if a string is made up entirely of digits. This is really helpful if you have a string and you're not sure if you can convert it to an int or not. You can check, and if it's all digits, you can safely convert it to an int. Is space, it's true if all of the characters are white space, which is space, tab, or new line. I'm not actually going to run these examples. We're not going to use this all that much, but they're very handy. I want to focus on this other set of methods, which have a lot of really useful methods in them, which is for searching strings or replacing things in strings. So find gives you takes a string and it returns the position of the leftmost occurrence of that string, or it will print -1 if it doesn't find it at all. Ends with, I mentioned before, it basically tells you if the string ends with the substring that you've asked about. Starts with does the same at the start of the string. Index is another name for find, basically. And then count tells you how many of a particular substring occur in the main string. And replace actually changes things. So we'll go back over to Python. We'll try a couple of examples of these. I'm going to comment out the stuff that I've been doing before just because there's getting a lot printed right now. So what could I do? I could say s3.find am. And it would tell me where that is. I could also do s3.find e. So I can find the positions of am or e or in or anything I want. And I can ask if it ends with something. Oops, I forgot the parentheses here. There we go. What else is there? You remember in the earlier example, I counted up how many e's there were in the string. So let's try using count instead. And I'm actually going to change a different one. Let's, well, no, because the long string is the only one that has more than one of a character. And I want to see what happens. S3 print s3.replace a by a. All right, and then I'm going to print S3 again at the end of that, just to be sure. So let's run that and see what it prints. So find, am, and e are going to be these ones. They're printing that am, is that right? Am is at position 8? I guess so. Yes, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So am starts at position 8, and the first e is at position 1. It is in fact true that this string ends with an exclamation point. So I got true there. There are 4 E's. And here I have the string where it has replaced every occurrence of A by 3 capital A's instead. Notice I printed the value of S3 at the end, and it hasn't changed. It cannot change. Strings are immutable. So each and every one, when I have a string method that produces a new string, it is always a new string. It is never a modification of the original string. All right, we don't have very many more types of string methods to talk about. In fact, I think this is it. This method is perhaps the one I use the most often in terms of working with strings. And that is the method called split. It lets us divide up the string based on a character or a substring. It removes that character from the resulting strings, and it makes a list of strings as its value. Okay, we're going to switch over and do another example. While you weren't watching, I added a 4th string, but we're really going to focus on S3 and S4 here. I've commented out the things that come below. And what I want to do is just to show you what happens if you call the split method on a string like S3. I'll do S1 too. Print S1.split, print S3.split. And we'll look at what the default behavior is. If you don't pass anything to split, what does it do by default? Well, when I called it on the first string, which is just Susan, it made a list containing Susan. Notice the square brackets. That's the indication this is a list, and inside it is Susan. But when I called it on the multi-word string, it did something somewhat marvelous for us. It took that string and it broke it apart at the spaces. So the default behavior looks for space, tab, or new line. It removes them and it breaks up the string wherever they were. So it read the first characters HELP, comma, and then it was like, oh, there's a space. So it took the first string and put it in a list, got rid of the space, and then continued. And so it ends up, if you're talking about text, it ends up breaking up the string into words for you. And now you have a list of words instead of one big string. It's incredibly helpful when you're dealing with text. All right, I want to show you another example though, just to show you that you can do other things with it. I think this is what I want to do. We'll try this and see what it does. Yes. So you might have data, for instance, in a comma-separated value spreadsheet, a CSV file. You might have data that you want to break apart that is not separated by spaces but by some other symbol. And you can, in fact, do a split where you specify what it should split by. Here it's looking for the substring dash dash. So I could have I think this will work. I could have a string that has a single dash and it's going to ignore that, but when it sees a double dash, it splits the string at that point. Yes, it did exactly what I wanted. This makes it very handy and rather flexible for many different uses, but the main one we will ever use it for is breaking a piece of text into words, which is the default behavior where you don't have to pass anything into the method at all. All right, this is a lot. There are a lot of things that you can do. The easiest way to get a handle on this is to practice with specific things that you want to do. So you want to do some particular text manipulation, sit down, look up methods, find out if there's a method that will do exactly what you want, and if not, you can usually put together a couple of methods to do exactly what you want. It's a very, very powerful set of tools. And as I said before, it is not my expectation that anyone should sit down and try to memorize the list of string methods, not even the shorter list that I've shown you here, much less the full list that's available in the documentation. There are a lot of them. What you want is to have in mind the kinds of things that string methods can do and know how to look them up so that you can find out what is the actual rules for any particular string method. All right, I will see you very soon.